we'll try to do the same thing here in this case as well. Try to record it and make it available to you if you wanted to see it one more time. Or it will be there if you wanted to use that. So we're talking about photosynthesis today. Last chapter was related to kind of general metabolism, how energy is produced, what are different components of energy, and how energy is utilized. So the main source of energy on this planet is sun, and sun is used to produce chemicals, and the most important chemical that is produced on this planet is carbohydrate. Plants are the source of those molecules. When carbohydrates are produced in the presence of sun, that is called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is synthesis in the presence of photo. What is photo? Photo part is light. What is light? Light is in the form of energy. It is in the form of waves and in the form of photons. Photons are physical particles that come from the sun. It takes a few minutes for those particles to arrive here, but it is in the form of photons. And photons are energy. Those are packets of energy. Those are in the form of waves. So sun sends lots of different waves. Any other waves that you know? UV light, UV waves. And it also sends other types of waves as well. Anybody knows any other waves? Radio waves. Those are the waves which are used for communication purpose. How about heat waves or infrared rays? Now, those are all things that are coming from sun. So the white light that we get from sun is a mixture of lots of different things. Those are in the form of waves. Some of those are short waves, like UV light. So UV light is not very useful. It is useful, but it is not really useful because it causes some damage to our skin. So short waves. And then there are more destructive type of waves as well. Gamma rays, for example. So those are even more destructive than this because they are shorter. The shorter they are, more energetic they are. The bigger waves they are, they are less harmful. So like we use microwaves. So microwaves are useful because they produce energy for us that we use for our cooking and for heating things. So photosynthesis is synthesis in the presence of sunlight. And when we talk about photosynthesis, the most important factor of synthesized product is carbohydrates. There are other things that are produced as well. Carbohydrates are not the only thing that are produced by plants, but carbohydrates are the most important because that's the source of energy for plants and animals both. Even though plants produce them, but plants and animals actually both utilize this source of energy. Plants themselves use that energy, use it as a source of energy. But animals rely on plants because animals don't produce carbohydrates. So that's what photosynthesis is. Where does it take place? It takes place in plants. It takes place in 3 different organisms. It takes place in all plants. Then it takes place in algae. Where else? Okay. No, fungi are actually not photosynthetic. Even though they look like plants, but they are not plants. How about bacteria? Some bacteria, which are green bacteria, or actually not only green, those are photosynthetic bacteria. So where do you think most of the photosynthesis takes place? In water or outside water? With all the trees and forests and woods and everything? Outside? No? Anybody else? You said that it's outside water, and then you said no, right?
I don't know.
What do you think? It takes place inside water or outside water? Outside? So you all agree on that? Nobody wants to say the final answer. It's actually mostly inside water, because this earth is covered mostly with water, and there are forests, tall trees, and all that. But if you actually consider bacteria and algae that live in water, they are actually more than plants. Surface-wise, they are more than plants. So most of the photosynthesis takes place in lakes and water, in oceans, because there are these two big groups of organisms, photosynthetic bacteria and algae, that live in water. And it takes place in anything which is green in color. Photosynthetic, all these trees are green. Some bacteria are green, and most of the algae are green, or they are red in color, or brown in color, or orange in color, but they are all photosynthetic. Even though the plants are the big source on planet, on the land that we can see, some of the plants are very tall. They are 300, 400 feet tall. But most of the photosynthesis takes place inside water in those small organisms. Bacteria is just a single cell, algae are single cell as well. So most of that takes place there. So the definition of photosynthesis is converting sunlight into food, and it needs these three things. It needs sunlight. So without sunlight, there is no photosynthesis. It can synthesize things, but that's not photosynthesis, because photo is in the presence of sunlight. Then the two important things are carbon dioxide and water molecules that we saw actually in the last chapter as well. Carbohydrate is needed, carbon dioxide gas is needed, and water is needed for that process. So plants take these two things from outside. They absorb water from the soil, so that's why they have roots. So the roots help them to absorb water molecule, and carbon dioxide gas is absorbed through their leaves. So leaves can absorb this carbon dioxide gas. So a lot of places where people actually smoke, they usually put some plants there in that area. So they put those plants there so the people can come in those areas, and when they smoke, it produces carbon dioxide gas and other types of gases. But that carbon dioxide gas is absorbed by the plants in that area. So carbon dioxide gas is one of the three components that are needed for the production of carbohydrates. So the equation that is written for that purpose is, anybody remembers what is the equation that we talked about last time? So it is CO2 plus water in the presence of sunlight. It produces carbohydrates, or you can write it. If you don't want to remember this, you can say glucose. What else is produced in photosynthesis? Anything that you use, anything that you breathe in, oxygen. Oxygen is produced in that process as well. Even though oxygen is considered a byproduct, it's not the main product. The main product is this, glucose. So oxygen is produced too, and this is also vital for us. Without oxygen we cannot survive. We do produce carbon dioxide gas, and without carbon dioxide gas, plants cannot synthesize carbohydrates. So these two processes are related processes. On one side is this glucose molecule that is produced in photosynthesis. When we consume glucose, it produces carbon dioxide gas and water. So the way this glucose is produced from carbon dioxide gas and water, and when it is broken down, it releases carbon dioxide gas and water molecules. So it is recycling. So it goes back to what we talked about last week or so, which was that energy cannot be created or energy cannot be destroyed. It just changes form. So this is chemical energy. It is produced from here, and when it is broken down, it goes back to the same thing. So it is recycling. Water is getting recycled. Carbon dioxide gas is getting recycled as well. So as if we are given just a definite amount of things, so we have to live with those things, but in such a way that they can be interconverted. One thing can convert back to where it came from. So these three are the components that are needed for photosynthesis. This is the equation. 6 molecules of carbon dioxide gas, 12 molecules of water produce a single molecule of glucose, and 6 molecules of oxygen, and some water molecules are produced as well. That is the overall equation of photosynthesis. 3 components, which are these 3, carbon dioxide gas, water, and light, produce carbohydrate or glucose. Oxygen is released, and some water molecules are produced as well. Where does it take place? It takes place in the green parts of the plants. Mostly, when we talk about those, it's mostly in the green parts of the plants. Where do you see green parts of the plant? It's in the leaf, or any other part of the plant which is green. The stems are green in some cases, especially when plants are young. They have green stems. So if you have ever actually played with plants, and whenever you sow them, the first thing that comes out are these parts, which become green, and then this part, which is the stem of the plant, which is green. As they mature, then the stems actually are not green anymore, especially in case of trees. But the small plants continue to maintain that green stem, and branches are green as well. So meaning that they are photosynthesizing here. But the main place where photosynthesis takes place in case of plants is in their leaves, because they are green. And inside their leaves, this is actually a section of a leaf. So inside the leaf, the part which makes them green are these structures, which are called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are organelles. And organelles' definition is that they are membrane-bound structures. These are bound by membranes, and organelles contain chlorophyll. So it's spelled like chlorophyll, P-H-Y-L-L. So chlorophyll is the green pigment. It's a molecule. It's an organic molecule which is green in color. Why is it green? Why anything looks like the color it is? Why this pen is red? Why do you see this as a red color? Why not a green color?
Doesn't it reflect off every other color other than red?
It is actually reflecting back the red color, the part of the color which is red. That's how your eyes can see it. So if it is absorbing a color, then your eyes cannot see it. So it is red because this is what is being reflected off of the surface of this pen. That's what goes in your eyes, and eyes have receptors. Eyes have some cells that can detect the color. So if something is green, that means it is reflecting those wavelengths which are green in color, and it is absorbing everything else. If something is white in color, what does that mean? It means it is reflecting all the wavelengths. So it is, and if something is black, it means it is absorbing everything. So that's why it's not giving you anything. It's just keeping everything to itself. So plants look green because of chloroplasts. Chloroplasts have chlorophyll, and chlorophyll molecules are the ones which are reflecting green color so that we can see them. So the greenery is because of that. And it comes from the chloroplasts, which are organelles found inside the leaves. So when photosynthesis and respiration takes place, photosynthesis is the production, and respiration is the breakdown of what is produced in photosynthesis, which is primarily glucose, and the cycle of life continues. Plants produce glucose molecules. Plants and animals both consume that glucose, and then they release carbon dioxide gas, which is used by photosynthesis. So this cycle continues. Without the production of carbon dioxide gas, photosynthesis cannot take place. Without photosynthesis, glucose is not produced, and then these animals cannot survive because animals cannot produce any source of energy for themselves. Anything that is being produced is done by plants and bacteria and algae, and animals only consume what is being produced by the plants. Plants themselves cannot survive if they don't produce carbohydrates because they also rely on carbohydrates for their own survival. So they need to produce glucose not only for others but for themselves as well. So whenever glucose is consumed, it releases carbon dioxide gas. Whenever you eat, what you produce at the end is carbon dioxide gas and water molecules that are used by plants to continue with the cycle of energy. This is the spectrum of wavelengths that come from sunlight. So out of all these wavelengths, all these waves that come from sun, very small part of that spectrum is perceived by the eyes. Eyes can see only a very small part of that. Can you see in the infrared? You cannot. You can if you are a mosquito. So mosquitoes can see actually here. That's how actually they follow you. When nobody can see at night, mosquitoes and insects can follow you. How they follow you? Because they can sense, they can feel the heat that comes from your body. So that's why those obnoxious insects at night don't leave you alone, because they can still, even they cannot see, but they can see the waves that are coming from your body. So that's how they can know where you are. That's how snakes can see you also. So they can see where you are because of the movement of the body. They can sense the heat from your body. The heat is in the form of waves also. This is heat here, which is bigger than this kind of a whole spectrum that can be seen by your eyes. So your eyes can see violet color all the way to the red color, but cannot see below this, cannot see above that also. So that is a shorter wave, and these are the bigger waves. These bigger waves can be utilized as communication or as heating sources. Here is heat, and there these are more destructive waves. X-rays or UV or gamma rays. These are all very destructive type of waves. All of them are coming from the sun, so we can use some of them. We cannot use the other ones. But some insects can see here, and kind of in the infrared. And when the cameras are made, that actually the night vision cameras or goggles that are prepared by Army, those are just to detect also the heat. There are some cameras that are used at night time. Those also use the heat at night. Okay, so that's the very small spectrum of the entire wavelengths that come from sun that are used here. So within this visible wavelengths, visible range, plants can use only some of those. Plants can use some on this side and some on the red side. They cannot use these, and they reflect those off of the surface. That's how actually you can see the color green in plants, because they cannot use that wavelength which is in the green wavelength. So they can use some from here and some from here, and they reflect off everything else so that they look green. This is the same spectrum, which is called the visible spectrum or visible wavelengths. So here within this wavelength, this part, which comprises of mostly this blue light and red light, this is where plants can absorb. This is where chlorophyll can absorb those wavelengths and utilize them as a source of energy for photosynthesis. They look green because they cannot use that. So you can see from these charts here that here and here, those chlorophyll molecules which make them green can absorb these wavelengths and this wavelength, and there is no absorption here. So this is the absorptions, relative absorptions in percent. So you can see here there is no absorption in this whole range, which is yellow and green, but it picks up here in the blue range, and it picks up here in the red range as well. Everything else in the middle is not, it is not useful for the plant, so they don't use that energy, and that's how they actually reflected back, and this is how they look green. Otherwise, if you provide them only two types of wavelengths, which is blue wavelength and red wavelength. Has anybody actually grown any indoor plants? Do you use any bulbs for that? Actually, there are some bulbs available now. Those are actually LED bulbs. So if you actually use those bulbs, they give only two colors in those bulbs. One is actually blue and other is red one. Actually bought it from one of my class. When I received them, I was surprised to see that actually they have eliminated any other wavelengths from the middle. So LEDs are more focused and they are more within the wavelengths of range. So in greenhouses where the production is done at much faster pace, they also actually use only these two wavelengths. They have light bulbs that are either blue or red. They actually don't have any white ones. That is because of this, because the plants can use only the two types of waves. So the green is reflected off of the surface, and only blue and red ones are the two that are useful for photosynthesis. Any questions so far? Okay. So far what we have learned is that where it takes place, where photosynthesis takes place, what is photosynthesis, where does it take place, what does it produce, and what are the things that are needed for photosynthesis. Light, carbon dioxide gas, water is what is really needed. So plants, since they need carbon dioxide gas to produce carbohydrates, there is a passage for those gases to be exchanged. And gases are exchanged from the lower part of the leaf, from the bottom of the leaf. There are tiny holes which are called stomata. So those are tiny holes that are present on the kind of lower part of the plant, underneath of the leaves. So underneath of the leaves are these stomata, or stoma is singular and stomata is plural. So these are tiny holes that are guarded by some cells. So these holes can open and close. So whenever there is a need of carbon dioxide gas inside, these holes open and carbon dioxide gas can go inside. So inside these leaves, oxygen which is produced here also, which is a byproduct of photosynthesis, oxygen can be released through the same stomata as well. So stomata, they allow carbon dioxide gas to go in. They allow these gases, water is in the form of vapor, so it is in the form of a gas at that time. So that can be released through the same pores underneath the leaves as well. So where photosynthesis is taking place is actually in the entire length of these leaves, which are in the form of these cells, which are called mesophyll cells. Mesophyll cells are kind of spongy cells. Some leaves are very thick, so if you have ever seen some houseplants which are very thick leaves, or cactus is very thick, and cactus is in the form of those stems, but the stem actually does photosynthesis for cactus. But all of those have these cells, which are called mesophyll cells. Mesophyll cells are the cells that contain chloroplasts, and this is where photosynthesis takes place. So photosynthesis takes place here, produces carbon dioxide gas, produces carbohydrates, produces oxygen. Oxygen is released, water is released, and carbon dioxide, that gas that goes inside, gets fixed. So once it goes inside, cannot come out from there. It is just trapped once it's inside. It is trapped so that it can be utilized to produce carbohydrates from them. Carbohydrates, since they are solids, so they cannot be released through these stomata. So they are kept inside. First, they are kept inside chloroplast, and then from there they are actually released and they are stored in vacuoles. Plants have vacuoles, which are another organelle. So they are stored in the vacuoles in the form of starch. So remember we talked about that a long time ago, that glucose makes starch. Glucose is a monosaccharide and starch is a polysaccharide. which is produced from glucose molecules. Multiple molecules of glucose make molecules of starch. So starch is a polymer, and glucose is a monomer or monosaccharide. So monosaccharides make polysaccharides. It takes place inside, again, this structure which is called chloroplast. And chloroplasts are found in mesophyll cells of the plants. And within the chloroplast, this is a single chloroplast. This is just a model to show what's inside. Chloroplasts are bound by these membranes because these are organelles, so they are bound by these membranes. There are two membranes around it. They have double membrane. And then these stacks or these pancake-like structures, kind of stacked pancake-like structures those are called grana. These are multiple ones which are called grana, or a singular one is called granum. Granum is stacks of these disc-shaped structures, pancake structures. These pancake structures is where actually the photosynthesis takes place, inside chloroplast. But inside these disc-shaped structures, which are part of a granum. Granum is a stack, and each one of those is called thylakoid membrane, which is shown in the next slide here. So this one is a stack, that is this stack here, and this stack consists of these disc-shaped structures, and these disc-shaped structures are called thylakoid membranes. Thylakoid membranes is where actually photosynthesis takes place. This is where chlorophyll molecules are located. This is what really makes everything green. So chlorophyll molecules are here inside chloroplast in these thylakoid membranes. So if somebody asks, where does photosynthesis take place? The correct answer is inside chloroplast in thylakoid membranes. Inside chloroplast, because chloroplast is a bigger structure. This is an organelle, and inside this chloroplast, inside this organelle, where it actually takes place is these thylakoid membranes. So thylakoid membranes have chlorophyll in them, and this is where the photosynthesis actually takes place. These are structures which are fairly elaborate structures. So when light hits these thylakoid membranes, in thylakoid membranes, since these are membranes, it's called thylakoid membrane because it is made of the same type of membrane which covers the cell itself. So this covering, which is the plasma membrane or cell membrane, is in the form of a membrane. Then inside cell is this structure, which is chloroplast, made of these grana. So this is also a membrane, the same type of a membrane that this membrane is, which is on the outside of the cell. And then on these thylakoid membranes, these are also membranes. They are made of the same kind of material, which is this one here. This is the membrane that we have seen before. This is phospholipid bilayer, so which is found here, and that same phospholipid bilayer is seen here as well. There are two of these type of membranes. So everything inside the cell is actually being done in case of eukaryotes in those membranes. Membranes are really important. They not only control what is transported in and out of the cell, but they also control these type of reactions. So the photosynthesis in this case takes place in a membrane. So when light strikes, the strike of light, which is in the form of energy, energizes some electrons. So again, this is also a game of electrons. When light strikes in the form of energy, light is a form of energy. So when it strikes the membrane, inside this membrane, there are there is some organization. That organization is in the form of a photosystem. In that photosystem, electrons actually are energized because when energy arrives, then that energy is utilized by electrons that are present in this area, so they become excited. They are at lower energy level, they rise to higher energy level. So, it's like, humans, when we get excited, we are excited when we hear something good. whenever we see that good grade, we get excited. But once we get excited, that excitement cannot continue forever. Once you are excited, once you are angry or something, it cannot continue to the same level. Even you are happy, that happiness cannot continue forever. It has to come down at some point. So after you hear good news, you are excited, then the reality strikes after that, and then come down to the ground level again. Wherever you were before, you come down to the same level again. So the same thing happens here with those electrons that are present here in this photosystem, which is kind of a narrowed or more concentrated area for receiving the photons from sunlight. So sunlight strikes, it excites some electrons there, they go to higher energy level, and that energy is harvested, meaning that energy is captured from sun. Sun gives that energy to the plants, to that one part of the cell, and this is happening everywhere here. This is only one area which is shown here. So that electron that gets excited is the source of energy that results into carbohydrate synthesis. So it starts there at that level. This is the same photosystem. So energy strikes in this photosystem, which is again in the thylakoid membrane, and its concentrated area is called photosystem. So electron gets excited, it jumps, it goes and leaves the photosystem. So it receives sunlight, gets excited, leaves the photosystem, rises above, and when it rises above to its level, this is where the whole process of photosynthesis really starts. With the sunlight, the whole process starts from there by transferring that electron from lower level to higher level. And as I said before, that in case of organisms, it's all game of electrons. Electrons do everything. Electrons are a source of energy, and electrons produce things. Electrons break down things, because these are packets of energy that can move from one place to the other and do a lot of things for us. This photosystems concept is a very similar concept to what we see actually in these dish antenna. What is the function of those dish antenna that we have through satellites? What are they doing?
Give the signal for the camera.
Exactly. So they are receivers, right? They are receiving some signal coming from satellites. So so they are big because they are capturing those wavelengths that are coming. Those are actually the radio waves that are coming from satellites. So when we receive them, they are concentrated in certain area. So that's why actually we change the direction so that we can receive those signals coming from a satellite from a company, because a company has a satellite somewhere which is revolving at the same speed as the Earth is, so they stay in one place. So we are kind of relatively located with each other at the same time. So this whole dish is just like a photosystem. Photosystem's role is to capture sunlight, and then when it captures sunlight in different areas of this dish antenna, they actually move it to a certain central point. So they kind of concentrate them in a central point, which is this one here. So when they concentrate here, from here, from here, from here, from here, so all of those, what they are doing is they are moving the energy from sun to a point in the center of this place, and electrons there are getting excited because they are receiving that. Excitement is not over like excitement. Electrons are not living, so they are they are just particles. Their excitement is the energy level. So energy level is low before they receive sunlight. After they receive sunlight, energy level increases. They get excited. So when the energy level increases, that means now they are ready to do something. And it is all happening in the photosystems. There are two different reactions that take place in photosynthesis. One set of reaction is called light reactions, and other set of reaction is called carbon reactions. Light reactions, what do you think from the light reactions? When would those type of reactions take place?
During the daytime.
During the daytime, because they are light reactions. So these reactions take place during the daytime when there is sunlight available. Carbon reactions take place not during the daytime. They can take place during the daytime, but they usually take place at nighttime. And in the old books, they used to be called as dark reactions. Because of the connotation with the dark, with all the science fiction and everything, now actually they don't call them dark reactions, they call them, they actually either name them after the scientist whose name was Kelvin, or they call them carbon reactions. So carbon reactions take place not during the daytime. Light reactions have to take place during the daytime when the energy is available, when energy is captured here. So what happens in this case here, that is actually in the concept map that I have circulated here. So light-dependent reactions, which are shown here on the left side of this concept map, and Kelvin reactions are, Kelvin cycle is actually the carbon reactions. And this is taking place during the daytime. The products of the light reactions, light-dependent reactions, is this one, oxygen. This is where oxygen is produced. The very first stage of this reaction is where oxygen is being produced. So oxygen is one of the products here in this concept map. There are two other things, ATP molecule and NADPH molecule. NADPH molecule is an electron carrier, and ATP is the energy molecule. So both of those are being produced in the very first stage here. So all three of those are being produced. Oxygen is released from the leaves, so that is gone. So once it's produced, it is gone. So we don't really talk much about that afterwards. What is important here is this and this molecule. These two molecules are really critical to produce carbohydrates, and they are utilized in the second stage of photosynthesis. Now this is where they are being consumed. They are produced here, and then they are consumed here. Both of those. So you actually do see them in the Kelvin cycle, where they are served. They serve as kind of input for synthesis of these sugar molecules, which are here at the bottom. So this part is taking place in thylakoid. This half is taking place inside thylakoid. So if you actually take this concept map again, and you can actually just divide it into two halves. The first half is taking place in the thylakoid, where oxygen is released. These two molecules are produced. The second half is taking place on the outside in this area, which is called stroma. This fluid part, which is this part here, outside of thylakoid, that is called stroma. So stroma is where the second stage of photosynthesis takes place, in which the products of first stage, which are these two things, ATP molecule and NADH, so they are being produced here. They are used in this stage to produce what? Glucose. So the product of the second stage is just glucose. The product of first stage are three. One is oxygen, the other two are these two. These two are being produced here, ATP molecule and NADPH molecule. This is electron carrier, and this is the source of energy. Both of those are needed to produce glucose. Glucose is produced in this part of chloroplast, which is the fluid part, and its name is stroma. It is called stroma. Not stomata, but stroma. So stomata are, the difference between stomata is the spelling. Spellings are completely different. Stroma and stomata are two things. Stomata means holes, pores. So stomata, we're not talking about, we're talking about stroma here, the fluid part. So this reaction, carbon reactions are taking place that produce glucose, take place in the stroma of chloroplast. And these are taking place inside these light harvesting or light capturing discs in the form of membranes, and they produce these two molecules. Both of those are utilized in the second stage, and glucose molecules are produced in the second stage. So where does oxygen come from? Oxygen comes from the breakdown of water molecules. So water molecules release oxygen because oxygen is a part of this molecule as well. So these two reactions, side by side, work perfectly with each other. All right, so without really going into any detail here, don't get actually too confused with all these, these different structures and everything else. This is just showing the thylakoid membrane. This is one of the discs of those thylakoid membrane. This is again the same membrane, and inside it is hollow because it is a hollow disc-shaped structure. So where it is taking place? It is taking place in the membrane. So this is the photosystem. There are two photosystems. So photosystem number 2 and photosystem number 1. And the function of this is to receive light. This is also receiving light. This is receiving light here as well. Both of these actually receive light, and they energize. They activate their electrons that are present here, electrons that are present here. From here, when the electrons are energized, they move. When they move, they are channeled through this chain of electron transport chain. They go to the second one and do the same thing there. These electrons that arrive from here to here, they are energized again with light. They are activated, and from here they are utilized to produce NADPH molecule. So, which is what happens in case of light reactions. So light reactions are to produce NADPH molecule, which is an electron carrier. So electron is being moved from here to here to here. So this molecule receives that electron and become reduced. Whenever something receives an electron, it becomes reduced. That's why NADP plus molecule gains this H at the end. So that means this is the reduced molecule. So that's one of the things. The second thing is ATP molecule. ATP molecules are produced from this pump, which is called ATP synthase pump. Role of this pump is to phosphorylate, to add phosphate to ADP molecule and produce ATP molecules. ATP is produced by this special pump, which is also attached to this thylakoid membrane. So now, 3 things that we have talked about, which are the products of first part of the photosynthesis is oxygen. So oxygen is produced by breaking down water molecule. The second product is ATP. ATP is produced by a pump, which is attached to the thylakoid membrane. And the third thing is the production of NADPH molecule, which is produced with the receiving of an electron. So it receives an electron or a pair of electron, and it becomes reduced by itself. So these are the 3 things that are in photosystem number, which is part of the first part of photosynthesis. Then the second part, okay, moving on to all of these things from here. Now the second part, which is the production of carbohydrates. The first part in the light reaction is produce this, produce this, produce this. Why do we need all of those things? So that these can be utilized in the second part, which is the carbon reaction that takes place in stroma of chloroplast, is to take these things, actually not this thing, these 2 things. This one is released from the leaves. These 2 are the ones that are utilized in the second part, which is called carbon reactions. Carbon reactions take place in stroma. It's also called as Calvin cycle. These carbon reactions are also called as Calvin reactions. So in this case, carbon dioxide gas along with these 2 are combined together to produce glucose. So that takes place in the stroma. There are 3 stages of that. Those 3 stages are these 3 stages. Carbon dioxide gas is fixed. So meaning fixation means that it disappears. Carbon dioxide gas is fixed, so it changes its form. So carbon dioxide gas is kind of combined with ATP and NADPH molecule. Actually, we don't call it as being combined. It's called fixation, meaning that it is added to other molecules, and it kind of disappears in the gaseous form, and it is turned into other types of molecules. So after it is captured, fixation means it is captured when it goes inside through stomata. It is captured, it is fixed inside the leaves, in the mesophyll leaves. And then in the second stage, carbon dioxide gas is reduced, meaning that it is added with hydrogen and it is added with electrons, so it is reduced. And then this molecule that you don't have to kind of remember the name of this also. This molecule, or you can just call it RUBP molecule. So this molecule is kind of recovered.
I just have a question. What does PGAL mean?
P-gal, so don't worry about that. You know, I will not basically hold you responsible for that. This molecule, this is actually a special type of photosynthesis called C3 photosynthesis. But what we really want to focus on is these three stages of photosynthesis, of the second part of photosynthesis, which is Calvin cycle, or which is carbon reactions. So three things happen in second stage that produce carbohydrates or glucose. You know, carbon dioxide gas is fixed, meaning that it is captured by the leaves. The second stage is that carbon dioxide gas is reduced, so it is added with electrons. And the third stage is this molecule, RUBP molecule, is regenerated, because this is a cycle. It is called as Calvin cycle. So Calvin cycle has some components that are capturing this carbon dioxide gas, and this is one of those molecules. The first molecule that combines with carbon dioxide gas is RUBP molecule, and at the end it is regenerated. So these are the three stages. Again, I don't expect you to remember all the details of these molecules. This is the P-gal molecule again. But what is important is to know that there is carbon dioxide gas fixation, there is carbon dioxide gas reduction, and the third stage is kind of a recovery of this molecule that is the first molecule that combined with carbon dioxide gas. Carbon dioxide gas comes in, carbon dioxide gas combines with this molecule, and then goes through this cycle in which it produces this molecule that becomes glucose molecule at the end. Glucose molecule is produced in this reaction. So since it's an ongoing process that continues as long as its components are available, so it produces glucose molecule, but it continues as well. So these are kind of siphoned off from this cycle, but this whole cycle continues by itself as long as carbon dioxide gas and all energy ATP molecules and NADP H molecules are available, so it continues. This is where ATP is consumed. This is where it becomes part of the cycle, and this is where NADPH molecule is consumed as well. So it is recycled back to what it was before, after its electron is taken from it. And ATP molecule, it's broken down and it produces ADP molecule. So this is where it came from too. So when ADP molecule was produced, ADP molecule gave rise to ATP. So they are reversible. NADP plus molecule is also reversible. So it produces NADPH molecule, one reduced form and one oxidized form. So they can be exchanged. They can be they are interconvertible. So once the glucose is produced, then glucose is joined together to produce starch molecule, which is a polysaccharide. So this is how these molecules are stored. This is a cell here. These are different cells here, shown here with this cell wall. And these glucose molecules are stored in the form of starch inside these vacuoles. They are kind of small membrane bound structures also. So if you have to take a slice of this potato and stain it with some dye that is called iodine that we have used in the lab, so you can see this potato containing all of these small vacuoles that are completely filled with the carbohydrates or starch molecules. Glucose is also joined in a linear molecule with the glucose like that, and it produces cellulose, which is a part of the membranes. So plants are made of, plants produce a lot of cellulose as well, because that's what makes the structure of those plants. Other molecules other than glucose are fatty acids or glycerol. They are produced through photosynthesis. Fructose, which is another glucose-like molecule, is produced through the process of photosynthesis. Starch and cellulose as well as some amino acids are produced. So glucose is not the only thing that is produced in photosynthesis. It produces some amino acid, produces fructose molecule, produces some fatty acids and glycerols that are used to make oils in plants. So it's a rich source of energy for humans and other organisms, because it produces these useful things, or glucose and starch, amino acids, and fructose, then these type of molecules that are used for synthesis of more complex molecules. I think we need to stop here. Yeah, we'll stop here. We'll talk about maybe a couple of slides next time. So before next time, please review the chapter number 6 as well, because next time we'll try to finish chapter number 6. So before you leave, just leave this one page with me.
Oh, we're covering chapter 6 this week as well?
Yeah, we will start chapter 6 next time.
Okay.
This week.
Oh.
On Thursday.
Oh, okay.